Hey everyone, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about the Twitter hack that just happened last night. So we're going to go through all of this, what's going on, what happened, what we know thus far, but also we're going to talk about the more deep-seated systemic problems that Twitter and other platforms like Twitter have with situations like this. Now, with that, let's get into what happened here. And this is obviously coming from multiple sources, multiple news articles, and multiple people notified me, tagged me, sent me messages, whatever that was. And thank you everyone for sending that to me on the various platforms. And so here's what happened. Yesterday, on Wednesday, high-profile accounts, including those from Vice President Joe Biden, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, Mike Bloomberg, Uber, Apple, Coinbase, Binance, and others, actually started tweeting cryptocurrency scams in an apparent hit on the network. So if you went there, for Elon Musk, for example, it said, hey, if you send me one Bitcoin, I'm basically going to send you back two because I'm feeling generous, message along those kinds of lines. Now, here's the interesting part about this, is that the account takeovers were actually using an internal tool that Twitter employees use to actually control the accounts, to set policies and all of that, and gives them access into this on the back end. One of the screenshots published by Vice News and others basically of this internal attack showed things like the control panel and the account of some of the accounts that they were controlling, one of which was Binance. Again, these are the internal controls that Twitter uses to manage these accounts. The Twitter panel was also used to change ownership of some of these so-called OG accounts. These are accounts that have a handle consisting of only one or two characters as well, which is obviously, very hard to do now that Twitter has hundreds of millions of followers. And so they've been also taking those over and tweeting cryptocurrency scams from those accounts as well. Now, Twitter has been deleting the screenshots of their control panel and suspending users that actually tweeted these screenshots out, because that led, or as they claim it, leads to a violation of their rules. And so by virtue of that, if I, for example, were to tweet this out as a news item saying, here's a screenshot of Twitter's control panel, they would have suspended me. So then the question becomes, since this is an internal tool, how did the attackers actually get in? And from what we know thus far, they paid an Twitter employee for access. Now, a Twitter spokesperson basically told everybody out there that in terms of news, that the company is still investigating whether the employee hijacked the account themselves, or did they give the attackers access to the tool directly? And so Twitter itself last night tweeted, and I posted this on all my social media platforms, and I quote, "We detected what we believe to be a coordinated social engineering attack by people who successfully targeted some of our employees with access to internal systems and tools." Now, within 1 hour of the breach, Senator Josh Hawley wrote a letter to Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey, asking for more information about the attack, including how it occurred, how many users were compromised, and interestingly enough, whether this attack affected President Trump's account. As you know, he's probably one of the highest profile people on Twitter, tweeting regularly, and interestingly enough, his account was not actually tweeting Bitcoin scams and phishing scams, which I find interesting, which also makes me wonder if Twitter has that account isolated in some way because he is the president of the United States. Maybe there are more hardened controls on President Trump's account than anyone else because of who he is in the world at the moment. Now, Senator Hawley said, and I quote, "Please reach out immediately to the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation and take any necessary measures to secure the site before this breach expands." And obviously Twitter has been aware and they've been on it. And so with that, I want to talk about my thoughts on this, because I think that this really underscores a lack of control and auditing for their employees. Employees with deep access into an infrastructure seriously need to be checked and monitored as they work in real time to ensure that if there looks like any malfeasance is out there, it is caught, and is caught as fast as possible. Twitter has had these types of problems before as well. So if you recall, in 2017, a Twitter employee briefly deleted President Trump's Twitter account before Twitter quickly reinstated it as well. Also, two former Twitter employees basically abused their access to spy on users for the regime of Saudi Arabia, and this is according to the U.S. Justice Department. This went back to the whole Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist for the Washington Post that was apparently murdered by Saudi nationals. I believe it was in Turkey, if I recall. But Twitter employees were actually then spying on the internal direct messages and other things from people that the Saudi government basically considered suspects. So that is a huge issue. But I will also say this is not unique to Twitter in terms of basically insider malicious attacks. And so when you look at it, Google had a 27-year-old employee years ago actually stalk a 15-year-old girl by directly accessing her Gmail account, and he also had the ability to manipulate it, inserting things, removing things, all that kind of stuff. And so he was eventually caught, arrested, and convicted for that. Facebook employees have used their privileged access to basically stalk women, and there have been reports on that as well through Motherboard by Vice and others. Snapchat, workers have a tool called SnapLion that provides detailed account information and private access into accounts. It's basically like a global admin god kind of utility that gives them full rights. That came to light about a year ago or so. And even MySpace back in the day had a tool called Overlord that its employees would abuse to spy on users, again, back in the day. So this is not a unknown problem, let's say, in this. But by virtue of this, there's a couple of different things as well. We are using these platforms, which are quote unquote free to us, and they run fast and loose with data security and controls. They make their money obviously on data mining us, basically to hone their advertising capabilities to sell to advertisers. And so for them, it would be advantageous to get as much information on us as possible, which means a deeper level of access. And so we have to, I think, adjust our expectations of privacy controls on the back end and just understand that their employees are going to have access to anything we do on their platform. But I still think we should have some expectation of back-end controls, though, and let me explain. So, for example, if I'm looking internally to my own company here, we compartmentalize our customer data. Nobody in my organization, myself included, initially has access to client information. And if we need this information, then part of that information is unlocked temporarily, audited and monitored. And when the work is done, that data goes away for, let's say, an employee that is working on that client. So by virtue of that, we are mitigating the surface area for attack or malfeasance because no single one hit to, let's say, my organization can basically release all the data on all of the clients. That's something that I stress, as we are building these cybersecurity controls. And this is basic cybersecurity information. I mean, this is a standard that virtually anybody can create, and building a process around something like this is definitely doable, even for a large company with a massive data set like Twitter, although it looks slightly different, in terms of how they are handling this. And so auditing and control is beyond important, and this really underscores, I think, a problem that Twitter has fallen down on, and as I've mentioned, others have as well. But again, I think we have to balance those kinds of expectations with an understanding that these are free platforms, and they're going to data mine the bejesus out of us, which means they're going to run fast and loose, which means if they are not paying their employees well enough, and somebody comes in and says, we're going to pay you a crap ton of money so that we can make a crap ton of money by running phishing scams on high-profile accounts like former presidents, for example, that's obviously a very serious issue. So I hope that Twitter cleans this up. I don't think this will be the last time we see something along these lines, but if Twitter learns anything from this, it's going to be better internal controls and policies, as well as compensating controls as needed for their massive user base and their massive data set. And so that is your news of the day, and hopefully you were not affected by this if you're an avid Twitter user. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.